Hey there, welcome to episode 99 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We're recording this on January 6th. It's a Monday, January 6th, 2025. The time is 11:28 a.m. Today's episode will be about onboarding. It's basically about the documentation or the how-tos that we write and maintain more so recently, for people considering becoming a part of our endeavors, our efforts, joining up, so to speak. Not that that's everything, but certainly having some things written down ahead of time gives anyone pondering an opportunity to check things out beforehand, especially since we haven't had an in-person meeting in quite some time. In-person meetings take up a lot of time, speaking of, so it's best to have a little preparation ahead of time. Time is of the essence. Episode 99. Wow, we're about to go into triple digits. It's pretty fun. We're recording this, as I said, on January 6th. It's a Monday. Normally, I would be recording this on Tuesday. There's no real requirement. In fact, it would be probably better and healthier to record episodes of each of the audio programs that I produce, not necessarily on the day of publication. So not a big deal, but this is CES week here in the Greater Vegas area, so this week will be skewed a little bit as far as recording and publishing and whatnot. Hopefully that doesn't impact this episode, since it will be published as the show is starting, and I will likely be at the show tomorrow morning. Anyway, if you're not familiar with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, our purpose, we are a Nevada nonprofit corporation, a 501c3 public charity. This summer, June 16th, will be our third anniversary of rebooting this organization from its sort of parent, the Code for Vegas organization, which was from about a decade ago. Civic volunteer organization back then, civic volunteer organization now. Our purpose is to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. That means come up with cool ideas. Like, what do we need to do? What do we need to fix? What would be cool? What would be uplifting to our communities? Innovate, come up with possible solutions, new ones, maybe. Implement, that means do stuff, make things happen. And hopefully people in our communities, people around us, will enjoy the benefits of those efforts. If you are not familiar with the foundation, check it out. I'll have some links coming up, especially to our homepage. What was I going to say? I totally spaced. If you're, hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you are able to find the episode description, which contains the show notes, which I will read to you, and those links I just referred to. If you are not able to find those, that's weird, because they are part of the RSS feed that should be floating around the internet. So on that note, let's get started. Summary of today's episode: any organization doing anything needs to have some way of informing those joining in how things work, how people work together, and so on. No more true than I had that. No more true than at a volunteer organization. I don't know if at. No more true than with. Editing on the fly here. With a volunteer organization, especially one such as ours, intending to deliver ideation and innovation in the form of implementation, sounds familiar, to elevate our communities. So we write things down. The links for today's episode, the same for, since we're mostly talking about ourselves again, the Innovate for Vegas Foundation homepage, innovateforvegas.org, no punctuation, innovate for, F-O-R, Vegas, and then the dot and the org. It is a static web page hosted on GitHub for the moment. Once we get the how-to documents in a version 1 shape, those will be published within there. So I'm not even going to link directly to the repository, because nobody wants to flip through README files on a GitHub repository. So I've been told. Projectact.info, project-act, .info is our autonomous cohort tessellation initiative. It's broken out into its own website. It's still in its early days, but it's going to be an effort to aid with discovery of individuals and cohorts of civic volunteers and other things. Don't have to be civic volunteer necessarily. It's basically a decentralized connection network. The goal is to enable and encourage connection, communication, and collaboration between individuals and cohorts. Rather than having a top-down membership organization, if you're going to be decentralized and you have a membership application, if you need to apply to be a member of a decentralized organization, something's not right. So this is completely decentralized from the bottom up. projectact.info. There will be, I have discussed this in previous episodes, but there will be more of a formal rollout as things advance. agileforvolunteers.org, AGILE, Agile for Volunteers, spelled out, no punctuation. And then the .org is our first principles, program management, project management, workflow, tools and methods, and so on. Basically returning to those first principles of the original Agile Manifesto and some of the ideas that inspired it, extreme programming and Scrum and whatnot. We don't do stand-up meetings. We're trying to account for the time, effort, and expertise brought to volunteer projects by volunteer people. So a quote-unquote better way to manage, handle, and account for those contributions by individuals, and to value the individual contribution of one person by the various other volunteers, and vice versa, to make the effort, make the tasks, the plans visible. And also it will provide a nice interface to our autonomous cohort tessellation. Two great tastes, it should go great together. Finally, Mastodon for Vegas, Mastodon, Mastodon.Vegas. It's not launched yet as I'm speaking right now. It has fallen down on the to-do list, priority list, but it will be launched. I had said recently in the new year, so that gives me like 11 and a half months after CES week. But no, it's not. It's just lower in priority as far as rolling it out so people understand and know that we're doing it. So the proper amount of attention and storytelling to go around this. But anyway, check that out. Just keep an eye out. Well, I will announce when it's launched, but having the link floating around may or may not be useful. We'll see. Let's get started. So writing it all down is a good idea. Last week we went over our contributing document for our entire organization, which is finally reaching a workable state considering the scope and grandeur of what we would like to accomplish. Knowing the rules of the game when it comes to contributions, when it comes to contributing, especially to open source projects or anything, is an important thing. It's an important notion. It's an important ethos on all sides of the transaction. So it's not trivial. I'm not trivializing the audio program regarding it or the contributing document itself, certainly. It's dry reading. It's not something you would crack open on a boring Thursday evening for something to do, although I guess I've done that. Similarly, we have our organization how-to documents, which is mostly what we're talking about today. A little typo in the notes. You're useful for anyone considering joining the effort. That was not an edit. That was me exhaling and then going. So the how-to documents, this is pretty common in sort of open source or computer environments. How-to usually spelled out without a space. How-to, HOWTO, how to do something, how to accomplish something, how something works, etc. So the organization how-to documents are essentially how to get started, how to cooperate and collaborate within, etc. Having everything or nearly everything written down makes for the beginning of informed conversations. So where some might feel the documents are lengthy, maybe too long, others might believe, and rightfully so, that details are good sometimes. And this is one of those times. So if it's written down, that's a good way to begin a conversation. Hey, I read this and I have a question about it. Not, hey, can you re-explain the thing you wrote because I'm not going to read it? That doesn't work as well. And do note that as an all-volunteer organization, the effort going into writing, production by street, the effort going into writing things down is already, volunteer time spent, mostly by me. I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just saying that the balance of the math, the accounting, is such that if someone also a volunteer, says, can you explain something to me? And if I were to ask, did you read the thing, the how-to documents or the relevant specific thing about your question? If they say no, essentially the question is, can you spend more time than you already have for me personally? And that doesn't scale well. So individual person-to-person conversations are fine. They're essential in the world. But to cover the same material individually, and this is basically where we began. There's an origin story that I'll get to in a moment. But yeah, individual one-on-one conversations that repeat themselves over and over again are a tricky business when it comes to accounting for volunteer time. You know, if you're being paid to have the same conversation over and over, that's a different thing. Everybody's a volunteer in our organization, so it becomes important to be somewhat economical. Whenever someone says there are too many words, too much to read, I find it helpful to point out that words are there. One should not feel overly compelled to read all of them, but they will apply either way. You may or may not read or remember all of the vehicle codes in your locality when it comes to driving, but they are there, and they may come up at some point. And even if you never read them, you're still responsible for what they said. Fewer surprises later come from committing to rules of the road sooner, writing them down and making them available to all. So yeah, no surprises. And there's nothing in the contributing document that's profoundly life impactful. The origin story of the how-to documents in our early days, we were having a monthly hackathon meetup, which we may be bringing back, by the way. And we were attempting to add new projects, now known as initiatives, to our roadmap each month. So at each hackathon meetup, it was, hey, here's a new initiative. And it covers, we were inspired by the Future Forward documents that the city of Las Vegas had prepared in 2018, or published in 2018. So we weren't just pulling them out of thin air. It was practical community elevating projects at city scale that we could begin working on. So none of them were waiting. We weren't waiting around to be contacted for a collaboration project with a municipal partner or an NGO partner. And the monthly hackathon meetup was an opportunity to propose new initiative ideas and moving forward, to onboard newcomers, to collaborate on the initiatives that anybody was interested in thus far, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a reasonable idea. So the how-tos came out of like we're answering the same questions over and over again. So we should have like an onboarding document or a how to get started. Welcome to the organization. Welcome to the foundation. Welcome to the hackathon, etc. Of course, anyone would be welcome to bring an idea of their own, as I said. So all the initiatives were intended to be viable into the future. None are intended to like end. Since we are maintaining them, they're not developed in partnership, so they can be ongoing into the foreseeable, which is how most initiatives work. It's not unheard of, and I'm not even going to say it's completely uncommon, but it is not really common to have, especially software projects, just disappear. I have found that civic volunteer projects that do have a beginning and an end tend to wither because they're just not maintained and they go out of favor. So these would all be sustainable, ongoing initiatives that anyone joining our organization could jump into if they were interested. So there is no, we're not working on that anymore so far. I mean, something like that could come along. To set up our platform, it is important to answer questions, and there were several immediately, so writing them down made sense. Volunteer time is still valuable. If we can answer a question by writing it down, then do not, and then do not, and then not. And then writing it down, we do not spend value. Who writes these notes? Jeez. So we can answer a question, write it down. We do not spend valuable time answering the same questions over and over again. And it's often lost on individuals, especially younger people. Hey, I'm a volunteer. I showed up to your meeting. Your time is now my time, and I'm going to claim it. But that simply does not scale. So I'm not complaining about inquisitive people. If someone has a question that has not already been answered, then by all means, that's what the meetup was for. But if And I've actually had this happen if you're in a trade show or in a booth scenario where people are waiting to ask a question. So you'll get a question and then the person right behind them wasn't listening. They're not paying attention. So they walk up and they ask exactly the same question. And in that case, well, I'm here to answer the same question over and over again. That's fine. But in the case of our Innovate for Vegas Foundation, all volunteers, it simply doesn't make sense to require people to show up to something in person to hear the same volunteer energy expended to answer the very same questions over and over again. So writing things down benefits everybody by giving you a starting point, giving anyone a starting point before they can say, hey, you may read through this stuff and say, maybe this isn't for me. You've just saved a couple of hours on a weekend. You've just saved the time of others, et cetera, et cetera. This is most obviously true about the answering the same question over and over again. If we find ourselves in person, some already aware of the answers, others new to all of this, we recycle the same material every time when we could be spending the time on new ideas and making things happen. So if you're in a room and half the people were here last time and they heard the answers to the same questions over and over, they're like, oh, well, why did I already know this. I heard this last time. So it's a baseline starting point. And by the way, if you are doing anything in this world, it probably behooves you to read a little bit. If you're going to cook something and you want to read the recipe, you should do that. Or you don't have to read the recipe, and then whatever comes out. And then you later might say, oh, I read the recipe and I was way off. So just because you think and I'm not trying to pontificate here, but just because you think you know how things work doesn't mean you should completely skip over the time and energy that went into writing things down for you. So that's sort of the pitch on our lengthy how-to documents. It has answered just about all of the questions that have ever been asked, and then some. Obviously, as more questions appeared, more answers were delivered, all written down, as I just said. So organizational how-to documents have become fairly wordy. Detail is still good, but these will always require some maintenance to be of any real value, so they can align with reality in general and with the new ideas like our Agile for Volunteers initiative, which has sort of split off. It started out as a one-page part of our how-tos. Now it's a completely separate initiative. So it's grown into something larger. And that could be true of just about anything. So having things written down is always a good starting point, whether it's answering the same question over and over, or whether it's, maybe we should break this off and turn it into a separate initiative that we can invite others to participate in. Now, our how-to documents have been labeled in one specific case by a volunteer who turned out to be very transient, never really returned after dropping a little bomb. This is a wall of text and nobody's going to read it. Okay. They were intimidating to anyone who even might be slightly curious about joining our organization. They're just not going to read it. There's too many words. I'm not going to read it. That doesn't make any sense. Are the answers to my questions in this document? Yes. Oh, well, I'm not going to read it. The suggestion was to drastically simplify the text, and for a moment it seemed as though this person was making an effort to do that, to begin to stroll down that path. They disappeared, so I never really saw what they were working on or what they were attempting. Such is life. The take-home was clear, though. Anyone who wants to participate in our organization and its various endeavors must feel that they can add their insights, make changes that they see appropriate or even necessary, and negotiate wherever there might be disagreement as far as what the thing is, whatever the thing is in general. So this, as it turns out, is the way the world works, and it is a skill to be learned, if not already possessed. So in the case of this transient volunteer, it is a real skill to be able to say, hey, the documentation, the how-tos for onboarding people and for kind of spelling out how things work initially or in general, they're very wordy and maybe confusing or maybe even inconsistent. So I've taken the time to edit them, and without removing meaning, I've clarified. So the question is someone saying, this is too long, I'm going to remove information, or it is very long and not consistent or confusing. It looks as if this were written by, if it was one person, over several sittings in different contexts and so on. The latter is much more valid and a better way to begin any conversation about anything you're collaborating on. So rather than saying, I'm going to go ahead and break everything you've worked on, hey, I found some issues and I'm going to spend my time to contribute to fixing some of those issues and making this a better thing. And then in general, that's how our teams are to operate, is to collaborate together and advance our causes, not to delete the work of others, overwrite it, replace it. Oh, what you worked on is not worth it. Now, this needs to be balanced against the volunteer contributions of all involved. So, for example, if someone says, hey, I did all this work, and you say, oh, well, when someone has time to look at it or to collaborate with you, that's great. But for example, if we are operating in Agile for Volunteers mode and we have an atomic team working on an iteration in an iteration time frame, 2 weeks typical, and someone says, oh, I ignored all of your process and everything that you're trying to accomplish to make the most of volunteer time and to document things and to make it clear to newcomers who's working on what and where progress is and so on. I skipped over all of that and did things my own way. The response will probably be, so you're asking me to completely toss out everything that we're trying to work on to make the most of volunteer time and come up with some new way of spending volunteer time. So it gets tricky and it's not going to be a piece of cake. But again, this is job skills. This is how you work with other people. Not that this is a job, but it's a skill that you bring to a job. And really, it's a skill you bring to life. How can we collaborate to make the most of our individual contributions so that the sum of the whole, maybe if I can speak, it's a well-known expression, so that the whole may be greater than the sum of its parts, or in this case, the contributions of its volunteers. So we can all contribute some time, effort, and expertise, and we end up with something better or greater or more interesting or more fun or whatever the case may be by effectively summing our contributions. We do indeed, got to clean my glasses. We do indeed live in the age of generative AI, which means we can also have our tools of choice ingest the how-to documents. Did I skip over sometime? Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over the interstitial point, which I was going to make about AI. Apologies. And I'm not really going to edit this out. I never do. In the meantime, we have all been entering the age of AI. So that's after the wall of text initial comment I made. So we're entering the age of AI, especially generative AI. So we could very easily have just said, hey, ChatGPT or Devin or Copilot or whatever. Probably not Copilot. So a tool that writes human-friendly prose, describe how this organization should function. And I don't know where it would come up with an answer. It would probably pick some other innovate for something, or who knows. What would come of that, though? What happens when that document is generated? First of all, probably not going to be 100%, so you got to edit it. As part of our base functional approach to what we're trying to accomplish, individual volunteers should be bringing their time, effort, and expertise to bear on challenges of any kind. And they should come away having learned something, having taught something, having made an impact on the endeavor itself. All of these may be plural. Hopefully they will be. Do we get there by handing over the tasks to automation that has no such interest? So if I said, hey, ChatGPT, write our onboarding documents for our organization, and then I went on to describe everything, would my prompt end up being a lot of what I have written in our how-to documentation for onboarding new people? Probably. So I can just write it myself. Now, and the AI has no interest in the outcome. It's just going to string words together. That's how large language models work. Statistical word vectors, sentences, paragraphs that are of no consequence to the chat client. Whereas to me, the onboarding document is based on these conversations and these questions and sensibilities and trying to value everyone's time. And that's something that's often lost in general. If I may comment on this one last time, which is a lie, I will comment on it again many times into the future. Volunteer time is valuable. So if you're going to throw it away or disregard it. And this is a two-way street or a multiple-way street. So as is often the case with those who are kind of new to something, for example, if you show up to a volunteer, say around the holidays, unfortunately, they focus on like people are probably only hungry on Thanksgiving. So there will be like a Thanksgiving food drive or warm clothes, socks, coats, blankets, etc., Band-Aids. You show up to that and you say, okay, so I'm going to volunteer my time here. You tell me what to do. And the person might say, well, did you read the email that we sent out, when you signed up? And it was like, bring gloves and bring this and make sure you're ready for this. And there's going to be a lunch served. And so it spells out what you're supposed to do. And the person might say, no, I didn't do any of that. So can you tell me? So that volunteer is asking another volunteer to stop what you're doing, stop spending the effort that you're spending, and focus it all on me. And while sometimes this is okay, and again, there could be specific questions or whatnot. That's what, volunteering is a two-way street or an N-way street. But if it's a complete disregard of your time because, hey, I'm a volunteer with my time, then the system doesn't really scale, and it kind of breaks down because the volunteer time of everyone is valuable. And that's the intent behind something like this, is to say, you as a newcomer, your time is valuable, but so is the time of the people already here. And the goal is to collaborate, not to completely shift gears, to re-budget time and effort, to say, hey, we already spent time answering these questions. So would you do us all a solid and take the time to glance at them before you ask us to stop what we're doing and so on? So I hate to sound like I'm complaining, but it's just accounting. It's just math. The math works out better if everybody involved appreciates the time of everybody else involved and the effort and expertise as well. So we do indeed live in an age of AI, as I was about to say earlier, which means we can also have our tools of choice ingest the how-to documents, for example, and make use of the output with summaries or queryable data to ask questions of. Google's Notebook LM does those things, but it can also generate a two-person audio conversation about the documents, which is sort of comical and weird, but why not? I could literally make an episode of an audio program with two synthetic voices discussing our how-to documents. Rather than starting with AI-generated documents, we begin with words and insights from real humans with real interest in what we are trying to accomplish. So as I intimated earlier, this is really how AI tools, note these are tools, could and should be used. We retain our creativity, our agency, our authority, so we know what we're writing. Somebody writes has an AI code generator, generative AI, write some code for them, and then when you say there's a bug here, what's it doing? Oh, I don't know, I didn't write it. So the same could be said of anything. And when it comes to writing out detailed documents, there have been anecdotal tales already of attorneys filing court briefs or other documents, official documents with courts, with the clerk, and they are AI generated, and they don't even bother to read it, to edit, go through it. So I'm kind of against that myself. We retain our creativity, like I said, and authority and agency, so they remain human tools and outcomes and so on. We allow these very powerful tools of automation and AI to work for us, not do work instead of us. So they work as tools. Automated code, spell checker. Those are par for the course now. If you ship a document with spelling errors, either the spell checker was confusing, a correctly spelled but incorrect use of a word. I do that all the time. Like, oh, you wrote out, it should be or. Out is still spelled correctly, so tricky. Grammar checkers have now come on the scene and so on. So using these tools is fine. It ultimately helps us create better things that interoperate with other people more clearly, more concisely, more correctly. Some people will discredit a document if it has spelling errors. Try submitting your resume on a job with typographical errors. You probably won't get a response. We can summarize our walls of text, make them work for you. You can do that too. You can take all of our lengthy wall of text documents and paste them into your favorite chat client. Hey, read this and tell me what this means. You can query them. Like I said, you can have a conversation with PDFs now. That's one of the headlines from 2024 was you can now converse with your documents. Sure, you can. But if we start out with a rich collection of documents that are authoritative about what we're trying to accomplish and how, that's a better starting point than, we just had the AI write it for us. The original information is all there and it remains meaningful on its own. And then you can use tools to navigate, interpret, summarize, etc. So splitting the difference, aside from our how-to docs, how did I write this? Aside from our how-to docs become longer over time. See, that's spelled correctly. Becoming, I guess. Aside from our docs becoming longer over time, as more questions and more details fit in and so on, and a bit out of date. So that's what we're reviewing at present. So I'm probably about halfway done, probably a little bit more. We turned our Agile for Volunteer notion into a separate initiative. So where before it was one document, now it's a bunch of things. There's its own domain, which I referred to in our links section of this very audio program, and it's a completely separate GitHub organization. Ideally, we'll have multiple participants from other places. So it's not intended to be an Innovate for Vegas Foundation only endeavor. Although, we're going to use it internally, so you could call it a fork, or you could call it a sort of a generalized version. So there are some things like project naming, which can be normative in the public-facing Agile for Volunteers, whereas in our organization, we can be authoritative and say, this is how we're going to name our repositories and how we're going to name, here's the directory structures and so on, so that we can develop tools that will work with expected places, tools, locations, file names, etc. So in one sense, Agile for Volunteers should be flexible and general, but in other cases, and any organization or any individual that chooses to adopt it should be able to tune these things to their liking, right? So this is a little bit of a blue sky take on it right now, but essentially Agile for Volunteers, just like Agile itself, is not a set of rules. It's a set of ideas. And I also possibly a collection of tools and methods, and all these should be completely adjustable the way they are adopted, the way they are changed. Maybe they'll feed back into this main Agile for Volunteers initiative so that others might benefit from what people learn along the way and so on. So that's the idea there. So where we would like to, or here, we would like to make it available on its own for collaboration at large. So that's the idea. So we can make, we can make a more detailed standalone set of documentation about what we're aiming at for our own uses. So we can be very specific, and it did find its way from its origin within our how-to documents. So someone joining our organization should be able to say, oh, okay, here's exactly how we are implementing the Agile for Volunteers concept, right? And again, not a set of rules, but here's just how we can do things so that we make better use of your volunteer time and ours. And at some point, someone may say, wouldn't it make more sense if we did this and then wrote that down that way and then moved this over here and change? That's totally fine. Does that help other organizations? Maybe. So our take on how this could work as a completely separate undertaking that is a little bit more generic should offer one idea. Well, here's a variation on a theme, but others may find, well, we have more people, we have fewer people, we have a different layout, we're more virtual than in person, we're more in person than virtual, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just like the Agile Manifesto itself, it's not a specific how to do things for everyone. It's here are some ideas, here are some starting points, here are some notions. And internally, our version of the Agile for Volunteers initiative is about how we do things. And that can evolve through whole team participation in that very process. It sounds complicated. It shouldn't be. And it really isn't if people are willing to say, oh, okay, I can actually lend my insights and share my experiences, and we can collaborate on some ideas. Piece of cake. Similarly, we can take the initial ideas around engaging other organizations, which we first talked about in October of 2022. We were still only a couple months old. We had just received our 501c3 determination letter from the IRS. We could turn those into Project ACT initiative, our Project ACT initiative, which hopefully will be not just ours, which will have its own processes, contributing and onboard documents and so on. They're already sort of in their initial state, based heavily on the Innovate for Vegas Foundation documents from a couple of months ago. So the idea there is to have multiple organizations, multiple individuals connect with each other, collaborate across local boundaries. So, I always use the open transit as an example. If you want to work on a transit project for public transit, mass transit riders, bus riders, consumers of these services in your city, shouldn't you be able to collaborate with a fellow open source program development by civic volunteers effort? Say, oh, you guys are working on open transit in Vegas. We're trying to get something kind of similar working here in Tulsa or Philadelphia or Austin or wherever, right? Does it make sense to say, well, you're not in Vegas, sorry, and we're not in Tulsa? No, with open source projects throughout history, thousands of years of history have shown us that collaboration makes more sense. So especially if, we have a small team in Vegas, we have a small team in Tulsa, we have a small team in Philadelphia, we have a small team in Austin, but together, if we can find the commonalities, the things that we can make GTFS is the standard, the general transit file stream, file specification, something like that. GTFS is the standard way that transit companies and telemetry and application developers can share and interoperate across platforms to obtain and manipulate and publish and so on transit data, real time and schedule and so on. So we don't need to reinvent that wheel. And map renderings and there are a variety of things that will be very common between localities. So why should we all be recreating those things? As we so discovering each other and then collaborating are the goals of Project ACT. As our various initiatives take shape, there's always the possibility that we can spin them out as separate or externalized initiatives again. So Agile for Volunteers, Project ACT, there could be others. And as GitHub organizations or as full-on, like Agile for Volunteers is not really for everyone. It's for people that are doing the sorts of things that we're doing. Whereas a transit project should be available for everybody riding a bus, whether or not you're a civic volunteer doing anything like what we're doing. This doesn't mean that we aren't continuing to work on our initiatives, if we spin them out. But it does offer the impression that our impressions are open for others. What? Initiatives. But it does offer the impression that our initiatives, see there again, impressions was spelled correctly, but so in other words, if you come upon a website, Agile for Volunteers, it's a GitHub repository. I can contribute to this. If you come upon the Agile for Volunteers initiative within our Innovate for Vegas Foundation organization, contributions there might be, our take on this is much more aligned with our own organization. That's how we're trying to accomplish this. So they're basically, one is the fork of another. Technically, the Agile for Volunteers general project, general initiative for everybody should be the authoritative starting point, and our initiative fork, if you will, or variant should be based on that. But because we started developing this internally, we'll have to kind of flip the script on that a little bit. But generally speaking, if someone wants to contribute to the generally, maybe even globally available notion of Agile for Volunteers, we have a completely separate organization that is inviting of such contribution. If you want to contribute to our organizational Agile for Volunteers implementation of our initiative, here you might have to say, this is how we are using this, and here's what we've learned, but here's how we're implementing it based on our needs, and decide whether a specific variation is up for change, or if the wisdom that's being contributed should go to the general public version, if that makes sense. Both are public. There's no secret stuff going on here. Just a matter of context, audience, etc. Either way, volunteer contributions of any kind are always important. whether they're rejected or not. I mean, someone who takes the time to contribute, as long as they're willing to also take the time to understand what the rest of the people involved are expecting. Again, volunteering is a 2 or more way street. So, hey, I volunteered my time. Well, you're asking me to volunteer my time in response. So it's a 2-way street, and hopefully a learning experience for all as far as valued and valuable interactions, collaboration, contribution, etc. Especially when we're working through the blue sky phase, that's the best time to get some ideas flowing. Describing what we hope to accomplish, and later describing to the world what we have accomplished so far. So ideally, all throughout any of our processes, whether it's the blue sky at the beginning, here's what we kind of want to accomplish, or documenting, end user documentation, or here's how things work, or user experience, right? Documentation includes how people are using the thing you've made. Hopefully the whole entire process says, hey, we spent valuable time and we made something valuable. And then others can say, yeah, you did. Cool. Everything's better for it. So repos and websites, GitHub is a feature that enables the creation of a repository website that will display not as a collection of directories and rendered markdown. So if you visited GitHub or GitLab, if you visit and you read the README, or if you visit our doc-org-how-tos repository at Innovate for Vegas on GitHub, then you can navigate to the doc-n directory and see the English language origin documents. And then later when we do translations, you'll be able to visit the translated directories. Those are great if you're a developer or if you're working on the documents. It's great for work. But I used to link to our repository. A casual person going to GitHub might, first of all, say, oh, I don't like GitHub, or I don't know how it works. I'm not a developer. It's not for me. And they might go away. So if you build a traditional website version, so you take all of these markdown documents, and they may or may not be linked in a usual way. There may not be a navigation sidebar. There may not be sections and subsection indexes. And so if you can transform the source documents into something presentable as a traditional, HTML, JavaScript, CSS website, then the consumers, the people that just want to read what you have to say, can do so a little bit more easily. So each of our repositories can be rendered as a normal, traditional website, which is the case with Innovate for Vegas, for example, as the beginning. So if we have actual HTML and JavaScript and whatnot, you can create a more traditional or more expected user experience to view these things, to view the documents and such things. We can apply our own styles and layout and other features for our documents and other entity elements rather than relying on GitHub to do the drawing for us. So GitHub repository navigation is very consistent, but it is not necessarily what you are trying to accomplish if you're trying to publish what you're working on for others to consume. So as we continue to develop our Agile for Volunteers workflow, initiatives and component projects are stored as repositories and displayed as website content, linked together in the usual expected ways. This will make it easier for newcomers to peruse the documentation, check out the initiatives, and for anyone to see what we're up to. And the Agile for Volunteers workflow can be implemented per component project repository, and then as each thing is advancing, we can show who's working on what, the whole team approach. We can publish statistics on, who fixed the most bugs this week, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you publish those in the context of GitHub, you reach a more limited or constrained audience, I think, and probably you would agree. But if we can generate normal website content, connect everything together, it will be a better visitor experience for the casual observer. Like, hey, hey, what are these volunteers working on? I'm not a technical person, but I do ride the bus. Let me visit the Open Transit initiative and see what's going on. Oh, look, they're doing this, this, and this. Eventually, as Project ACT, for example, the autonomous cohort tessellation moves along, our website content per repository can provide for connect information. What? I don't even know why I wrote that. Connective. Oh, our website content per repository can provide for connective information using network graphs. So we can provide the information for Project ACT and different repositories. That doesn't really make sense. I don't know who wrote this. He's fired. But connecting information using network graphs, this is our faux and dope. I've done episodes on this before. So network graphs indicate here's how this project or this person or this organization is connected to a different project or organization or person. So by representing those connections, we can show who's working on what, how we can discover across cohorts, across individuals. There's no membership. There's nothing to sign up for. You can just say, hey, I'm working on open transit. Hey, I'm working on a transit project too. How can we discover each other? Well, Google doesn't really help. You'll get all kinds of stuff. But if you can say, who else is a civic volunteer organization working on transit projects? And you show up in the network graph, like, oh, Innovate for Vegas Foundation has open transit and this other, they're doing something else. And so if you connect all that and say, hey, how can we collaborate on this? Then we have advanced the cause of civic volunteerism. There is no notion of, well, we don't have enough people, but we don't want to share. That doesn't help. So, I don't understand what the grammar notion was with this final paragraph, but if we can enable connection, communication, and collaboration with these tools as part of Project ACT, and that can extend to our own initiatives and connecting those initiatives and our civic volunteers to other cohorts, individuals working on civic volunteer projects, initiatives, etc. If they would like to make use of Agile for Volunteers, so much the better. So some of these things will enable what we're trying to accomplish internally and what we're trying to write down in our how-to documents about onboarding people. We can extend that reach to other organizations and say, hey, how can we work with you? Now that we've figured out how we can work with ourselves, how can we discover you, and how can we connect, communicate, and collaborate? And maybe we can all benefit from all of those things. So there you go. What do we got on the timer here? We got 49 minutes. Probably be closer to 45 when I truncate some silence. This is CES week, so I'm going to try to cut it short and leave it there. We'll publish this on Tuesday morning as usual. So I'll thank you for listening, and probably we'll have more to say about all this after this very busy week. So take care. Thank you for listening. Cheers.